So the session is going to involve a presentation by Ben Macpherson, who I'll introduce properly in just a moment, followed by a discussion about some of the issues raised in his presentation. And my colleague Lynne, Marr and I have got some areas to ask him about, but please do have a think during the session about anything that you would like to ask, because I'm sure he's more interested to hear from you. And we've got a range of businesses on the session today, ranging from the oil and gas sector to education sector, some charities and third sector organisations and others. So hopefully we've got a broad range of perspectives to bring. So starting with introductions, I'm delighted to welcome Ben here today. Ben's an MSP and he's the Minister for Public Finance and Migration. Before his current career, Ben studied both philosophy and politics before going on to study law at the University of Edinburgh and then practiced as a solicitor, and he worked at Brodie's for a while. In 2016, he was elected as the MSP for Edinburgh Northern and Leith constituency where he lives. And in June 2018, he was appointed as Minister for Europe, Migration and International Development in the Scottish Government before moving into his current role in February 2020. So today he's going to speak to us about immigration policy, and there's never been a better time to have that discussion. We're now just 4 months away from the end of the Brexit transition period. That means, of course, the end of freedom of movement and the end of the free flow of EU migrant workers from the EU. And that also means the introduction of the new points-based immigration system, which EU nationals and non-EU nationals alike will have to apply for from the 1st of January 2021 if they want to come to Scotland to live and work. And in addition to all of that change, employers have had to deal with, of course, the COVID pandemic. That's been a major distraction for lots of employers who were, I think, otherwise focused on preparing for some of those Brexit-related changes and who were encouraging their workforces to apply for the settlement scheme. So I think as a result, lots of employers will have a far shorter sort of run-in period than they otherwise would have liked to prepare for the new rules. Later this month, we're having a separate webinar on the new points-based system rules. So if you're interested in knowing the sort of nitty-gritty of those, feel free to register for that. But for now, I'm going to hand over to Ben to discuss some aspects of immigration policy that will impact Scottish businesses. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you very much, Elaine, and to Lynne, and a very good morning to everyone. I'm very grateful for this opportunity, and thank you to everyone at Brodie's for your help in organising this, and also thank you to everyone who's attending for your time. I have shared my screen and I'm going to take you through a brief presentation for around 15 minutes or thereabouts, and go through a number of different aspects. Of course, there's so much that could be said about immigration policy at the moment. It's such an important and pertinent part of both the Brexit question and the economic challenge that we face, but also the demographic challenges, and that will be a key theme that I will highlight through the next 15 minutes or so. But also, I think it's important to emphasise that, of course, in the Scottish Government, we come from this perspective of not having control over any immigration policy, and that is the domain of the UK Government under the Scotland Act, as you'll be aware. But of course, migration and the attractiveness of Scotland and the ability for people to come to Scotland is so relevant to devolved matters, whether that's the performance of our economy or the delivery of public services and other aspects of our communities and the enrichment of our wider society. So I'll just move on. I'm just sharing my screen, but yes. And so the discussion topics that I'll go through in brief to provoke some questions and to give us food for thought. First of all, some of the key facts around why migration is so essential to Scotland's current position and of course has been a key part of Scotland's story. Secondly, on the position of EU citizens, and when I say EU citizens, of course, I mean EAA plus Switzerland, but not Irish citizens, and that is the arrangement in terms of the EU settlement scheme and those who need to apply to that to stay. that UK government scheme. And then I'll talk more about how we in the Scottish Government believe that UK immigration policy could be evolved by the UK Government to be much more responsive and appropriate in the current circumstances to meet Scotland's needs and aspirations, but also to respond to the nature of the challenge that Brexit and the end of freedom of movement presents. And then lastly, I'll just outline a number of initiatives that we announced in our programme for government just last week. So just some of the key facts, first of all. I think it's important to emphasise in the first instance that over the next 25 years, all of Scotland's population growth will come from migration. We have a pension age population that's growing and that is predicted to grow by between 70 and 80% over the next 25 years, and our working age population is only predicted to grow by 1%. And all of that projected growth is down to migration. So that emphasises the sheer importance of migration to our demographic challenge. In terms of our workforce at the moment, there were figures that came out last week that showed that an estimated 222,000 non-UK nationals are in employment in Scotland. That's about 8.6% of the workforce. And crucially, in these times, 69,000 of those are classed as key workers. Now, those figures are from December 2019, so obviously there's been some significant disruption with the COVID-19 crisis since then, but that's the latest figures that we have and are indicative of the importance of immigration and non-UK nationals in the economy in general times. And obviously we want to move past this COVID crisis into a time of growth and prosperity again, in order to realise all the productive capacity and potential of the Scottish economy. We're going to need people to do that, and of course in terms of our demographic challenges, we need to attract people here as well. As Elaine said, from the 1st of January 2021, because of Brexit and because of the UK government's decision making on immigration policy, the new points-based system is being brought in, and businesses will be required to undertake new bureaucratic and costly processes as a result of that to bring anyone here. FSB Scotland shows that 95%, some research that they did shows that 95% of small firms have no experience of using the UK's current immigration system because they've relied on freedom of movement or not needed to engage in it before for other reasons. So that poses a real significant challenge for the business community to have to use the immigration system in a different way from January 2021. And worryingly for us, from January 2021, as well as the many other barriers and costs that the end of freedom of movement and the new points-based system will create, there's going to be a salary threshold of 25,600 in order to be able to bring someone here in most situations. And that's challenging for Scotland in particular because many roles, the vast majority of roles, as the slides suggest, emphasise that in Scotland people earn less than £25,000. So some real challenges there around the salary threshold that the UK government have brought in or will be bringing in. So there's a lot more I could say about the context, but that's it in brevity. One of the big important issues that we have to do in considering all of that is encourage as many of the EU citizens who are here to stay after Brexit, so that they continue to make the net contribution that they do right now to our public finances, to our GDP, and also to the wider enrichment of our society. So, as was mentioned at the beginning by Elaine, the UK government have brought in the UK settlement scheme. This was launched last year in order to provide the route that the EU citizens, and again when I say EU citizens I mean EEA plus Switzerland but not Irish citizens, the process that they will need to go through in order to secure their rights. And we have argued consistently for the last years that this EU settlement scheme should be declaratory, which would mean that a process would be taken where, using the legislative process, EU citizens' rights would be secured in law, and it would be a process of obtaining an administrative clarity of that. However, the UK government instead have adopted an application-based system, which means that every EU citizen here, no matter how long they've been here, so whether that's 5 years or 50 years, will have to apply to this scheme to secure rights that they already have to live, work and study in Scotland and the UK. We will keep pushing for a declaratory system because we think that would make more sense practically as well as principally. But at the moment, we have this application-based system. And of course, in order for people to stay, while we disagree with the system in principle, we want as many individuals to go through that system in order to secure their rights. And that's why in the spring last year, we launched something called the Stay in Scotland campaign. And that was our effort over and above anything that the UK government are doing to make sure that EU citizens and employers had the knowledge, but also as much assistance as possible to go through the EU settlement scheme. And we produced an awareness raising element to that, whether that be a media campaign or posters and leaflets, but we also produced guidance for EU citizens and guidance for employers, supported by significant public investment of over £1 million. And that has been successful so far in that we have had a good level of engagement with it. However, we want people to use it more, and that's part of the message I really want to emphasize today, is that these materials are there for all of you who are listening and everyone you know to be utilised to support EU citizens in your workplace, in your communities, and beyond, in order to get not just the information they need, but crucially the advice. And that's what's different from what we're providing, and that's why it's over and above what the UK government are, in that we have supported Citizens Advice Scotland to create an advice line that any EU citizen can call, which is 0800 916 9847, as is on the screen there. And this is a really good resource because it has the necessary support and advice as well as information that people can access. It's being used, but we want it to be used more because we want to get as many EU citizens secured through the settlement scheme as possible. There are also a number of other materials here on the slides, and I'm very happy to circulate this information to all of you who are listening. There's also an important aspect there, which is that we've recently created some fact sheets, which just also highlight and emphasise the rights of EU citizens in Scotland. And the reason we believe this is important is because the EU settlement scheme, as the slides demonstrated and as was emphasised at the beginning by Elaine, closes in the end of June 2021, because they're under the withdrawal agreement, there's scope for there to be 6 months of additional time for citizens to secure their position after the transition period ends. So of course the transition period ends on the 31st of December rather, but then there'll be another 6 months until June 2021 in which EU citizens can still apply to the scheme. But this is going to be a very challenging period in our view in the Scottish Government, because you will have people who have been here for less than 5 years who will be able to apply for pre-settled status. You'll have people who've been here for more than 5 years who'll be able to apply for settled status. And you'll have new people arriving who will won't be able to apply to even if they're from the EEA and Switzerland, they won't be able to apply to the EU settlement scheme. So it could be a very confusing situation for employers and other providers. So we want to make sure as many people as possible know their rights and know what people are entitled to. So we've produced those materials and we'll keep emphasising that. But the fact that we're entering this period at the end of the transition period, and when freedom of movement ends, but it still has that 6-month window for people to apply for the settlement scheme, emphasises that we really want to get as many people registered for settled status as quickly as possible. 2 other aspects that we are campaigning on in that regard is that we are working with different groups who represent the rights of EU citizens to argue that rather than the UK government having these differences between pre-settled status and settled status. So pre-settled status you can acquire if you've been in the UK for less than 5 years. Settled status if you've been here for more than 5 years. We think it would make eminent sense for the UK government just to have one status, which would be settled status, which would provide stronger security for individuals, but also avoid this differentiation, this confusion, and the need for EU citizens to apply for settled status from pre-settled status as they accrue 5 years of residency. So we will keep pushing on that, and we also believe that EU citizens should have the right to have hard copies of their status if need be. At the moment, they are only able to acquire digital status from the Home Office, and a digital status is something that is beneficial in that we want to move to utilising technology, and that's all well and good and appropriate. However, if people want physical proof, we think that they should be able to have it. So we'll keep pushing on that. There's a lot more I could say about the status of EU citizens, but I think because of time, I'll leave that point there, but really interested in any questions that you might have on that. And just to emphasise that we're doing all that we can in the Scottish Government to help people through this process, but it's going to take a collective and collaborative effort across stakeholders, business, the third sector, all of us to support the EU citizens in our communities and in our workplaces to obtain the right legal protections that are there in order that they can continue to live here in Scotland and keep contributing the huge amount that they do, not just to our economy, but to the wider enrichment of our society. So the transition period ends at the end of December, and then, as was emphasised earlier, we enter a period where the whole of the UK has a new immigration system where we don't have any freedom of movement, and everyone, of course, has to go through the system in the way that those who aren't from the EEA in Switzerland have had to go through to this point. We in the Scottish Government have concerns about the practical challenge of delivering a new immigration system from January 2021 with all the other demands on government. However, it's the UK government's commitment that they have emphasised that they will be bringing in this new system, but I'm concerned about it, to be frank. But we are engaged constructively as much as we can with the UK government to emphasise, well, if this new system is coming into place in January 2021, then we need it to work for Scotland. And the UK government has said that it wants the system to work for the whole of the UK, and we're asking them to engage with us to understand from our perspective and our stakeholders' perspectives, including business and a range of others, of how this could work for Scotland. Now, it will be a more restrictive system, and for us, because freedom of movement has been so beneficial to Scotland in terms of our economic performance, the provision of our public services, and helping us to tackle our demographic challenges, anything that's less than freedom of movement will be a step backwards in our perspective. However, there are a number of aspects where we have sought to influence the UK system and will continue to do so. And overall, that the way that we think it could best be influenced is for it to have a tailored approach to Scotland, which I'll say more on in a minute. But there are a number of other aspects that we have pushed on. one of which we emphasised for several years, was the reintroduction of the post-study work visa. This is going to happen, thankfully. However, it is not going to be launched until summer next year. So those graduating this year will not qualify for the route. So that's quite disappointing. But overall, we're glad to see that happen, and that's something we pushed on for a long time. We've emphasised that the net migration target should be ended. This is happening, which is a good thing, but unfortunately, there's still a very restrictive approach from the UK government in terms of its aspiration in the ethos of what it says to reduce the number of people coming here. We have emphasised that we think there needs to be a simplification of the bureaucracy and a review of excessive fees related to applications for visas and settlement and citizenship, a simplification of the rules, and importantly, particularly at the moment, an end to the immigration skills charge and the immigration health surcharge, both of which are a real economic burden on those who are coming here and affects our attractiveness because of that, but also will be a burden for employers, and particularly those small businesses that I talked about at the beginning who are going to be dealing with the immigration system for the first time. The £1,000 immigration skills charge every year will be a significant cost. And of course, the health surcharge is increasing to £625 a year, effectively meaning that people are having to pay for their healthcare twice if they locate to Britain, and not just through their taxation, but then also through the surcharge. And we think that's unfair and also makes us less competitive for attracting people here. As well as trying to be constructive and emphasising those points to the UK government, we have also sought to influence the shortage occupation list. Now, this is an aspect of the points-based system that could potentially provide some greater tailoring to the system for Scotland. We want to see the shortage occupation list for Scotland work. We've fed into it for many years. And we've emphasised that the Scottish Government should have more say in it. We've actually just submitted our evidence to the Migration Advisory Committee on this, and hope that they will take our position seriously, because our submission is on behalf of all of Scotland, all stakeholders, to emphasise what Scotland needs, and that the shortage occupation list will allow people to come here for less than the salary threshold and in a more open way. If it's executed correctly. To this point, it hasn't been well used, and we want to see it better utilised, and we hope that the Home Office will engage in that in a more effective way than they have done before. We have pushed for the extension and protection of rights of family migration, particularly in terms of fairness, but also because family migration really helps in terms of our demographic challenges and to improve our demographic balance. We've emphasised the need for a rural pilot scheme, which was recommended by the Migration Advisory Committee. And also, as I said, and I will say more on it in a minute, we have emphasised the need for routes for workers of skill and salary levels, of all skill and salary levels, to be able to come to Scotland, and a Scottish visa or tailored approach to immigration is part of that. So the Scottish visa is the way that we have emphasised how a tailored system could work to a variance of degrees. We believe that the fact that we have a homogenous immigration system in the UK is unusual, in terms of, if you think of Australia and Canada, who have systems that are much more flexible and responsive to the needs of different parts of those countries. So we've argued for some time now, and particularly in our paper that we published in January, that we could have tailored solutions for Scotland. And since I took this role as Migration Minister, I've been seeking to listen to different stakeholders and then provide very practical solutions to the UK government that they could embrace within a UK framework. Because obviously our position as a government is we think Scotland should be an independent member of the European Union and could set its own immigration policy as part of that. But while we're in the UK, we want to see the immigration system work better for the whole of the UK, but particularly for Scotland. So the concept of the Scottish visa would allow, if powers were devolved, for the eligibility criteria of that visa to be set in Scotland, identified to the needs of Scotland. It would make Scottish ministers accountable to the Scottish Parliament for that. And it would be practically deliverable because migrants holding a Scottish visa would be required to live in Scotland, and we could that would be both able to be regulated and enforced through existing systems in the Scottish tax code, in terms of the tax code would set where people could work, and secondly through existing enforcement systems with regard to residence. It would be an additional option within the UK system, so we're not looking to replace other avenues into the UK. This would be an additional way of businesses in Scotland being able to continue to attract people and give people a way into Scotland that was there, and not an additional way to attract the people we need. That the UK might, as a whole, might not want to keep a door open for, but we would like to, and it would be in our benefit to, and the Scottish visa could facilitate that. We could design it so that there was no sponsorship role for employers, so cutting the bureaucracy, cutting the costs that are going to be, unfortunately, brought in January 2021 as part of the UK government's points-based system. We could create a system that wasn't that didn't have an immigration skills charge. We could create a system that didn't have a salary threshold. So this would be a very practical way of Scotland continuing to be able to have a specific route to attract the people we need within the UK framework. And also to be able to go out internationally and promote an ability to come to Scotland, because one of my and many people's main concerns about Brexit is that it is sending out a message that we're not open anymore and we don't want people to come here. Unfortunately, that is how it's perceived. And we in Scotland, of course, want to continue to promote that we are open and we do want people to come here. And while we have done all that we can as a government to emphasise that message across Europe in terms of marketing and through other means, we're constantly also facing the reality that the UK government is proceeding with Brexit in the way it has and continues to do so, and also that it is bringing in this more restrictive immigration system, and the practical effects of that will hit Scotland just as much as it will hit the rest of the UK, if not harder, because of our particular challenges. Just draw attention to this table, which is in our paper on pages 19 and 20, go through the different aspects. And it just shows the different degrees of power that could be devolved or facilitated in order for there to be a tailored approach to immigration in Scotland. So models 1 and 2 could be delivered by the UK government either through the points-based system, giving more points for coming to Scotland, or through the shortage occupation list being used effectively and appropriately. Our preference would be to move to a position of model 3, which is where the Scottish Government defines the criteria for an additional route for migration to Scotland, receives and assesses the applications, and then nominates the successful applicants to the UK Government, where the Home Office receives and assesses the application and then issues the successful visa, or the model 4, where the difference would be the Home Office would verify that visa. So these are two very practical positions that we've given the UK government, that they could engage by creating that accountability and that responsiveness through the Scottish Parliament, but also work in collaboration with the Home Office to deliver something differential and practicable through the UK system. So I could say a lot more on that, but I encourage you to look at our materials, and happy to take any questions on it. And we continue to present this to UK government as a very reasonable proposition of how to make the UK immigration system better for all parts of the UK, and in our case, particularly for Scotland. And as part of the programme for government, we will continue to promote and urge the UK government to engage with tailored immigration policies for Scotland, including the Scottish visa. We're also going to develop and publish a population strategy next year, which is about internal migration, as well as how do we tackle the demographic challenges and consider within the COVID context how we continue to sustain communities in rural and remote parts of Scotland in particular, but also in parts of the West Coast. We will continue to push our Stay in Scotland campaign to support as many EU citizens as possible through the EU settlement scheme and working with others to do that. We will also launch a Welcome to Scotland resource to help emphasise and support emphasise the attractiveness of Scotland and support people to come here and to provide that additional support for individuals when they do come here. We will develop and publish proposals for a rural migration pilot for Scotland to continue to present practical proposals to the UK government where they could respond to the need that there is to continue to attract more people. And we will continue to fund our Talent Scotland programme, providing information and guidance to support individuals and employers to retain international staff. And also, I should say that this is part of our ongoing effort, as I mentioned earlier, to attract people from around the world to come to Scotland and work and thrive here, but also to attract people from the rest of the UK. And we actually had a publication of the latest report from our independent expert advisory group last week, which demonstrated and articulated that net migration from the rest of the UK for Scotland is positive, and that we've actually reversed that position that was historically the case of Scots leaving to other parts of the UK. Now actually it's a very much more positive position where we are attracting more people from the rest of the UK and seeing more people also continue their lives in Scotland and building their careers in Scotland. So and these are the publications that I've mentioned, the Expert Advisory Group report that I've just spoken about, the response that we gave to the call for evidence on the shortage occupation list, and our Migration Helping Scotland Prosper paper that was published in January, which puts forward the proposals for how tailored solutions could work to make the UK immigration system better for meeting Scotland's distinct needs. So there's a lot more I could say, and I look forward to the questions, but I think I should wind up now and hear from all of you. Hope some of that was helpful in terms of food for thought, and if there's anything that you think of after this that you would like to get in touch with me or my team about, contact details are on screen, and of course you can also follow us on Twitter. So thank you for listening, and I look forward to your questions and continued engagement. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. That was really interesting. Lots of things to think about. So I think we're going to move on to a sort of Q&A session now. I might kick off with one, and then if anyone wants to ask a question, if you use the sort of raise your hand function, which you should see at the bottom of your screen, or you can use the sort of Q&A box if you want to type questions, and I think we've got a couple coming through already. So one thing I wanted to ask about, you mentioned about the settlement scheme and how I guess you would have liked that to have been a kind of registration process, but instead individuals do have to make an application to apply through that. And there seem to have been a couple of kind of trends in relation to that recently, partly as a result of COVID. So we've seen, I think, a big drop off in the number of people applying, which isn't surprising, I guess, because of COVID. People have had other things on their mind. But that might be a bit of a concern if individuals aren't making their applications in time. We've still got a period of months to run, but I guess employers in particular would want people to get their paperwork, I guess, sorted before those cut-off dates. And secondly, the Independent, I think, reported that something like 10% of applicants were granted no status in June. So there seems to be a kind of increase in the number of people being kind of refused permission under the scheme. And again, that could be a concern for employers, because even if a small percentage of people become illegal, I guess, following the sort of cut-off dates, then that could be a problem. So yeah, I guess, do you have any sort of comments on that or thoughts about it?
Yeah, the amount of applications has generally responded to the elevation of the Brexit question in the news media and public discourse on Brexit as a whole. So, for example, we, as you would expect, saw quite a large increase in applications in Scotland as we went towards the 31st of January this year. I mean, our concern has been how do we emphasise to people that we want them to apply for this and to do it timorously without adding any sense of alarm or not being understanding of the fact that people quite understandably feel often quite affronted that they're having to apply for rights to continue to work in a place that they may have lived in for decades. So our concerns are that there have been some issues with the Home Office in terms of the process and how individuals have experienced the application process. So our strong encouragement from Scottish Government is use the resources that we've funded, and use Citizens Advice Scotland, use any other appropriate means that you as a business or as an individual would get your advice. Use your MSP if you're an individual, and of course law firms can play a part in that as appropriate. But we have funded Citizens Advice Scotland to take questions from individuals and to provide support, and we want those resources to be utilised. So if individuals have had a rejection or are confused about the process, and then I would encourage them to reach out and use the resources available.
Yeah, and do you have any insight into how strict an approach, I guess, will be taken when we get to June next year, and that sort of closure of the scheme, whether we will see people being kind of required to leave? Or
unfortunately not, and of course we are concerned about a position, despite all of our efforts in good faith, despite disagreeing with the declaratory nature of the system. We are concerned that we may reach a position next year where there are a number of individuals who still haven't gone through this process. The Home Office said at the beginning of the whole scenario that they are looking to approve, so trying to take a positive approach to approving as many applications as possible. But they, there are these instances like the ones you described where individuals haven't been successful. I mean, they say they are developing a policy on late applications, but we haven't heard any further on that, and we'll seek to influence that through officials. I have to say, and I don't mean this in a political way at all, but it's just a statement of fact and honesty, and that I haven't managed to meet a UK government immigration minister since July last year, despite requesting it in writing on 6, perhaps 7 now actually, 7 occasions. I had quite regular engagement with the immigration minister in the May government, but since the Johnson government has come in, unfortunately, there just hasn't been that engagement, despite me just requesting it in good faith, so that we can share information and engage as appropriate as you'd want responsible governments to do. So I hope that we will be able to get some ministerial engagement, which will help on all of these points. But so far it's not been forthcoming, unfortunately.
Okay. Lynne, do you want to go to some of the questions? Or?
Yeah, well, unsurprisingly, there's a few questions coming through about the costs of visas and sponsorship. So obviously a lot of Scottish organisations haven't had to engage with the sponsorship system thus far. And so there's some questions around the cost of getting a licence, the cost of visas, and whether you think Scottish businesses should have to shoulder those costs, and whether there's anything you think further could be done to mitigate the impact of the costs? I think you've already mentioned maybe removing the NHS surcharge and the immigration skills charge as well. But yeah, whether you can think of anything that could be done to mitigate the costs and also to help smaller businesses navigate through the sponsorship system.
Yeah, so we have emphasised the UK government on a number of occasions. We think that if they are bringing in this new system from January onwards and have ended freedom of movement, then they need to think seriously about the sheer expensive nature of the UK government immigration system. So we have called for some time for the immigration skills charge to be reconsidered, and particularly recently with regard to social care workers, for the surcharge to be removed. But unfortunately, at the moment, the focus seems to be to continue with these elements, although we will continue to try, because for small businesses in particular, if they're looking to recruit specific expertise that they need to bring in from elsewhere, then as well as recruitment agency, if that's appropriate in their circumstances, and just the general costs with recruitment, then they're going to have these two aspects to think of as well. And of course, this is going to be in a situation where individuals will be thinking, well, I can go to France or Germany or another EU country and not have this, but if I come to the UK, then I am going to have to pay this. And we think this is all wrong-headed from a whole UK-wide perspective, but it's certainly wrong-headed for Scotland, where we want to attract more people of all skills to realise our potential and tackle our demographic challenges, and to do that in a thoughtful and effective way. So that's why we say, if we could get some tailored solutions and differentiation into the UK immigration system that would allow Scotland to be more competitive, or to have a different position, say for example by removing the immigration skills charge for people coming to Scotland, then that would give us a much stronger position in order to not just practically bring people here in terms of the process, but also to be attractive. So we will keep pushing for those solutions, because at the moment we are concerned about the costly and bureaucratic nature of what's being proposed. Now, I appreciate the question is around what government could do. The UK government have said that they are considering if there's a way to use the system to reconsider their system to support small businesses, but they've been saying that for some time, and we haven't seen any practical proposals as of yet. So I'm sorry, that's not a very optimistic answer, but it's an honest one.
Okay, we've got another question which picks up on the Scottish visa for the minister. So this is someone who's asking a question specifically about their business and the fact that they hire IT talent across the UK. And so they've got people working with clients at sites all over the UK during normal times. And they're asking how you think a Scottish visa would enable this for them.
Well, if we could acquire a position where the Scottish Parliament set the rules and criteria of a Scottish visa, or even if we could get to, if that's too far of a stretch for UK government, a position where the UK government were responsive to the input of the Scottish government through the shortage occupation list, or and delivered through their points system as well, then we as Team Scotland, so different business community, the specific IT sector, could feed into the Scottish government to make sure that what we were presenting to UK government as what Scotland needed was accurate and proportionate. And I think the capacity for a Scottish visa to enable and unlock that demand from companies to be able to attract the talent that they need and to facilitate bringing the talent they need to Scotland is immense. And that's why there's such widespread support for tailored immigration policies in Scotland now, because we're not proposing it from a kind of constitutional based position. It's about practical solutions to make a difference for companies, whether that's in the IT sector or other growth areas, or in particular areas where there's a real shortage of individuals who want to come forward and be part of that industry here in Scotland. We need to be realistic about the fact that we need people to come here, and we want the UK government to engage in that, and to listen to all of Scotland. It's not about the Scottish government. It's not about a party political position. It's about listening to the practical need. So I don't know if there are any follow-up points in that regard.
Just generally around the challenge to policing the Scottish visa. I think you mentioned some of them when you were giving your presentation, but questions really around how easy it would be to police it. So people coming into Scotland, would they not just be able to easily move into England? I'm sure that's a challenge that's been put to you before. Yeah,
it has, and I can understand why to an extent, but as our expert advisory report, the expert advisory report emphasised just last week, there's a misnomer that people come to Scotland to then go to England, and it's not based on any evidence. In fact, the evidence emphasises the point in the other direction, that actually when people come to Scotland, they tend to settle here and contribute here. So, and the way that would be, the way a Scottish visa or tailored solutions within the Scottish system would be enforced, is that, first of all, the Scottish tax code is an existing framework that would make sure that people had to work in Scotland. So they would be issued with a Scottish tax code, and that would mean that they could only be employed in Scotland and earn money in Scotland. And then we have a range of public service checks already in the immigration system that would check residence. So that's already established. It would, of course, the whole project would require coordination between the Scottish Government and the Home Office. And we've been very upfront about that, and I've said that we're very keen for that to happen, and for it to be done in a productive and effective way. But the Scottish tax code, in terms of where people would work, and existing public service checks in terms of where people would live, is where it would how we would seek to enforce it. I think it's important to also say that, of course, so one of the areas that really benefits from inward migration in the economy is the logistics sector. So they're really worried about the amount of people they're going to have to be able to drive heavy goods vehicles, for example. But somebody could work for a company that was registered in Scotland and be employed in Scotland and live in Scotland, but still drive goods across the UK. So that's a very practical example of how the visa would work in a meaningful sense.
Okay, thank you. We've got another question about the possible extension of the deadline for settlement applications. So we've known that the UK government has always said they might do that if required, but this question is whether you think the deadline for settlement applications might be extended beyond 30th of June next year. I don't know if you have any insight to that.
We have requested both that the deadline be extended, but also that my colleague Mike Russell emphasised that the transition period should be extended, which in turn would have allowed the 6 months to be extended to apply to the settlement scheme. So we don't expect the Home Office extend the deadline, but it's something we will keep pushing for, but it's too risky to rely on any idea of an extension. So we encourage everyone to use all the support materials and help EU citizens apply as soon as possible, so that we can help our friends and neighbours and colleagues, and in many cases loved ones, secure their rights to stay, and make sure that they're getting the support through that process.
I've got a question actually. So one of the points in your slide, you mentioned some research that 95% of small businesses in Scotland have got no experience of using the UK's current immigration system. And that's, I guess, something that we hear quite a lot about. It's quite a complicated system if you've never used it before, even getting a license in place and then navigating all the rules, and then the rules change quite frequently. So do you think there's any more support that could be given to businesses, I guess, having to use the system for the first time? Maybe they've never had to do it because they've relied on EU nationals, but from the 1st of January onwards, they're going to be using this sort of process or system that they've got no experience of.
I think, as I emphasised in my summing up, that we will continue to support the Talent Scotland scheme, and we'll continue to take that forward as outlined in our programme for government. I mean, this isn't a replacement for professional legal advice. I should just emphasise that point too. But I would also say that, you know, we in the Scottish Government will seek to provide assistance where we can and where we think it's meaningful. But immigration is a reserved matter at the moment, and it's also incumbent on the UK government, who are bringing in this new system in this very short time period, with all the other pressures that society and government and business are facing. If they want the new system to be effective for small business as well as large, then I would say it's the responsibility is on them to do more, along with FSB and other institutions across the UK as a whole, to make sure that they, one, listen to the concerns that businesses have, and two, to think about how they make their new system practically effective and usable, and considerate of the needs of small business. And thus far we haven't seen that, unfortunately.
Does anyone else?
We do have another question, which is, there's one on Scottish visa. A lot of interest in Scottish visas, Ben. Any thought being given to how much it would cost to apply for a new Scottish visa?
Well, that would be the decision for us, and that's the possibility of it. And I'm glad there's interest in it, because I think the arguments are so compelling that we don't need to have this homogenous system that just responds to particular concerns or perceptions of immigration elsewhere in the UK that are more prevalent elsewhere in the UK, let's say. We could have an immigration system within a UK framework that thought about the needs and aspirations of different parts of the UK and was responsive in a practical way to delivering that. And the reason that we have added possibility here in Scotland is because we have the means through the Scottish Tax Code, as I talked about earlier, but also through the Parliament as an established institution, to be able to deliver this. There is an argument that the northwest of England and the northeast of England have quite similar needs for attracting more individuals from a demographic perspective, although their situation isn't as acute as Scotland, because of our story of emigration in the past. But the difference for Scotland is because we have this institution, the Scottish Parliament, and because we have the tax code, we're in a very viable position to be able to deliver something different. And I think the possibilities of it are extremely strong, and it's coming from a place of trying to be solution focused and deliver positive outcomes. And I don't understand genuinely why UK government hasn't engaged in it constructively thus far, but I will keep, and my colleagues will keep trying, because we think it makes eminent sense for everyone, including the UK government, if it does want to design a system that works for all parts of the UK, to consider the possibilities of tailored solutions, and a Scottish visa is, in our view, the most democratic and practical way to deliver that. I should say that, the Parliament of Scotland may decide that there should be some fees for the immigration process of a Scottish visa, but we would want them to be proportionate, not prohibitive, and that's a key consideration, and that's the point that we emphasise to UK government in terms of their fee policy making at the moment, and then our focus is on what a migrant can contribute, not on their ability to pay. It's because how many stories have we all heard of people who came here in one role and took up one role in one company and then went on to create another and create extensive employment. So we want to value all skills for the job that they do now, and for the possibility that people coming here can produce and create for the wider benefit of all of us in the longer term as well.
Thanks very much. I'm just looking at the time. I think it's a good time to sort of wrap up, but I just wanted to thank you very much for that interesting presentation and for dealing with all those questions. And if anyone does have any follow-up, please do contact Ben or his team or anyone at Brodie's, and we can pass on any sort of questions or feedback afterwards. But thank you all for joining. Thanks very much, Ben, for that.
Thank you very much, everyone. It's been a pleasure, and thanks for your time. And we really do want to continue to engage with as many people as possible. So please do get in touch if you have any further questions or comments. And please take care, everyone, and thank you for all that you're doing.
Thanks.